Are you a man in your 30s looking to become more confident in dating and talking to more women and create more opportunities for meeting more women? The first step of dating more consciously is about delving into yourself and really understanding who you are as a person. And today we will help you to understand better how you react to different dating situations, what certain women's dating behaviors might mean. So do stick around, because by the end of this video, you will have more clarity on the type of person who would be a good match for you. Hi, my name is Dr. Marie. I'm a registered psychologist, a relationship therapist, and a dating coach. And for the past 15 years or so, I worked with hundreds of men, helped them with their relationships, with their confidence to build the life and the relationships they want. And I'm really on a mission to help you to become more confident in dating and create more opportunities for meeting women and have the skills, the dating skills that are needed to start more conversations and build a beautiful relationship from day one. So let's talk about attachment adaptations. My biggest love in psychology is to talk about attachment. There is so much to talk about attachment styles or attachment adaptations here. Originally, I trained as a counseling psychologist, and I've been a therapist for many years. And then I focused on attachment trauma. So attachment is perhaps one of my favorite topics to talk about when it comes to relationships. And I hope to help you to really make sense of yourself and the women that you meet in this summary video on attachment styles. So essentially, what is an attachment? Attachment it's the original bond that the baby builds with his or her early caregivers. And this bond informs how the developing baby, child, and then adult really views him or herself, how they view the world, whether it's safe or not safe, and how they view other people and relationships. Attachment style is not fixed. So there are 4 different attachment styles, and I will briefly talk about all of those to introduce them for you. To help you to understand how one develops certain type of attachment adaptation or style, I will briefly talk about what might have been going on in childhood, how that then links to adult relationships. So if we start with secure attachment adaptation, and the securely attached people are roughly about 50% of people who've grown up in environments where, for example, as a baby, the baby's both emotional, physical, all of those needs were looked after. The parenting figures were being consistent. At least 30% of the time, there was good enough parenting, which meant about emotionally supporting the child, and then of course physically looking after physical needs, food, shelter, water, changing, and so on. But emotionally both upregulating, meaning like playing all of those silly games even with the baby, lots of eye contact, and then also down-regulated when baby is distressed. And this continues throughout childhood. And with different caregiving figures, this attachment bond varies. And ideally, in an ideal situation, there is at least one person who has been constant all the time. So what does it mean then? Someone who has had this sort of good enough, not perfect, no one's had perfect childhoods, there's always stuff going on in life, but someone who's had good enough parenting. They go into adult relationship believing that I can trust other people, I am good enough, they have high self-esteem, they've had opportunities for making mistakes, being able to express themselves, in the relationship express their views and opinions and all of that. And going into adult relationships, they have this inner belief that I will meet someone. My partner is there for me when I need them. I can turn to someone. And having this understanding of their emotions and able to regulate their emotions because they were soothed as a baby. Being in the relationship, it feels easy and flowy. Well, unfortunately, about 50% of people didn't experience this kind of good enough parenting. And then I talk about 3 different ways that when parenting wasn't good enough. And unfortunately, sometimes these insecure attachment adaptations get bad rap in whether it's in social media and even in some books. And I really want to emphasize that there is no one right or wrong. It just means that when one hasn't had a secure attachment adaptation, relationships can be trickier, and there's more need for growing and building oneself. So if we start with insecure avoidant attachment adaptation, and this is when baby grew up in an environment where perhaps parents provided for their physical needs. So food, shelter, changing, all of that. But unfortunately, emotionally, or whoever was the primary carer, perhaps it was mum, traditionally has been mum, was not able to do adequate soothing or even upregulating. Maybe there were various difficulties in the family, perhaps there was conflict, perhaps parents themselves never experienced this kind of good enough parenting and what it means to receive love, and then we're not able to offer this love. So it might mean that the developing child grew up with these comments like, boys don't cry, you need to just toughen up. Or that the distressed child was left with their emotions and there was this, no one came to soothe when the child was in distress. When children are around 2, 3, 4, 5, they're developing these big emotions. During this time, the child needs, of course, even prior to that and after that, but this is a critical time when the child needs someone to help them to navigate these big emotions. And often someone who has grown up in a household where perhaps there's been child emotional neglect, so parents have not been able to attend to the child's needs emotionally, because there's always a desire to bond with the caregiver. And when there isn't someone to bond with, someone to connect to, then the only way the child can connect is to turn to themselves and become hyper self-reliant. And it also may mean that emotionally, they learn to shut their emotions and learn not to rock the boat and just to keep everything internally, because it has not felt safe to express these feelings. And sometimes even some of my clients, especially therapy clients, have said, I am this monster. And what it actually often is that the child, there was no one to attend to the child's emotional needs and help them to navigate these difficult feelings. So this monster, in fact, is the bad feeling that, for example, feeling angry or upset leaves. And instead of being able to soothe oneself. So what then happens is that when someone has grown up in this sort of avoidant household, where emotions are not discussed or maybe things are brushed under the carpet, then you may go into adult relationships and you may long for a relationship. It may be difficult for you to trust other people because you've learned to be self-reliant. It may be difficult for you to express yourself because there was no one really asking for your opinion and your views at home. It may be that it's difficult to acknowledge, even when you get into a relationship, that there's someone else in that relationship. And you may appear aloof. And you may appear even quite distant. You may focus on your career or building your business because that feels safe, that is manageable. Whereas relationships can feel scary because there is the element of someone, and you have the experience of someone letting you down. So, and what does this then mean when you are dating? And if you meet someone a woman who has this more avoidant attachment adaptation, she may be very career focused. She may take a lot of time really to warm up because she feels quite insecure in relationships. Insecure in the way that she doesn't have the feeling of like that relationships are safe. She may not outwardly show that anxiety, but she may be quite cautious. And she may need a lot of time to adjust and adapt to dating situations and to kind of warm up. So if she is quite hesitant, it does not necessarily mean that she is not keen on you or interested in you. It may mean that she needs a lot of time. Or it could be that you meet someone who is not really available emotionally to a relationship right now, and it may appear as if she's playing some games and so on, but it may actually be her anxiety, and you need to assess then that whether this is the right person for you, even if you are attracted to her in other ways. So if you find yourself recognizing being this more avoidant, what does this mean then for you? What is your pattern like? Do you long for a relationship, but when you get close to someone, you close up and you freeze, you kind of shut down? Or do you perhaps withdraw? So depending on the level of that, it may be that before dating, you may need to engage in some therapy to really understand yourself. I mean, I recommend therapy and kind of coaching to everyone when they're dating to really understand what's going on and the relationship patterns and so on. But it may be so difficult for you to build a relationship that that therapy would be really helpful in terms of addressing those attachment related difficulties first. And then you would be more open to dating and meeting the right person. Then let's talk about insecure ambivalent, or this what's also often called as the anxious attachment adaptation. So a child and a baby who grows up in this sort of environment, it might be that parents are really loving, but they have to work really long hours, and the baby is often with some external caregiver. And children see everything through their own eyes, and they are self-centered by nature. That's part of the survival. And they don't initially, babies and children don't have the capacity to remember who's where and where they have gone. Initially, for example, baby only knows if someone's present. They don't know and can't remember if you've gone away, if the parents has gone away for 2 hours, or say 1 day or 2 days or so on. Or they're judging everything by how much interaction there is, because we are designed to bond. And if there isn't enough of this interaction there in terms of emotional engagement or physical kind of looking after the child, then even if the parents are doing their best, and maybe, for example, during the weekend, they're really loving, attentive and so on, but they work all the time, are away, the child doesn't know if the parent is present or not, where they're coming or going. Or it could be that the parent is very anxious themselves and they find it really difficult to soothe themselves. So they don't really know how to teach the child how to soothe themselves. So it's really difficult then to learn to regulate oneself. So whilst the avoidant type sort of tends to shut down emotions, the anxious type may become quite what's called clingy, or maybe kind of asking for a lot of reassurance. And maybe you recognize that as a man, you are someone who need a lot of feedback, and you very easily kind of dismiss that if the woman who you're dating, that if she is not straight away really showing a lot of interest, then you think, well, she's not interested. Whereas it is a very delicate dance. So her level of interest, you can only engage really by putting feelers out there and judging based on that. Is she responding or not? So, and if you are dating a woman who appears to be very anxious and needing a lot of reassurance, she may come across someone who wants to proceed very quickly. And whilst you may long to fast forward this relationship into a physical relationship really quickly, but if you truly want to build a relationship, you need to be the one who is slowing down the process so that you are getting to know her. Because potentially, if you are dating someone anxious and you are really kind of going with it and allowing the relationship to progress too fast without getting to know her, there might be problems ahead. And if you are especially fast forwarding physical intimacy before emotional intimacy and safety has been established, you have to remember that women are programmed to attach to the guy who they sleep with. And if you are not then interested in her, it creates a lot of complications. So for you, as a man, it's important to have some level of self-control when you notice that she might be more keen than that is appropriate to the level of contact and connection you have so far. It is important to spend time getting to know each other first, and only when you've had conversations about exclusivity, that is the time then to progress to physical intimacy. That way you will avoid a lot of problems. And then finally, let's talk about the third insecure attachment adaptation. And this is emotionally the most difficult one. So if you grew up in an environment where perhaps there was violence, there was neglect, there was maybe abuse, you might have developed this fearful attachment adaptation. Babies, of course, have been designed to bond with their caregivers, regardless of the parenting conditions or the family conditions. So a child who grows up in an environment where they're both fearful and longing for connection, this creates a really complicated internal dynamic and complicated feelings. So there's both qualities from being fearful of a relationship, but also fear of abandonment and constantly being in this hot and cold kind of situation. And this is usually, especially when you need to seek therapy to work through those feelings first before you get into a relationship, because only that way you can start a relationship from a very healthy and much more better, secure place. And if you are dating someone who is coming across kind of blowing hot and cold, and there might be certain indicators that someone is having real emotional difficulties. If they talk about their exes and maybe relationships with other people are quite troubled. So you need to look out for that if you are looking for a more peaceful existence. So when you're dating, it is really important to know yourself, but to also understand how the other people's behaviors are impacted by their relationship blueprints. You can acquire secure attachment adaptation later in life through therapeutic work. So what really separates all of these attachment adaptations are need for space versus closeness, avoidant, insecure, needing a lot of closeness. Whereas the truly healthy place is to be somewhere in the middle, where we're independent, but we come together. We're independent, we come together. Not in a hot and cold way, but in a natural way where we're negotiating this space together. Then another thing that separates this attachment adaptation is need for stability. So while someone who is more secure, they can navigate relationships, they can tolerate having more distance at time and so on, they can navigate this space very easily. Someone who is more insecure needs a lot of space. Someone who is more insecure needs often a lot of stability. Those people who are more insecure need a lot more stability. But then again, someone who is avoidant may either need a lot of stability, or because they have this tendency to cut off their emotions, they may also be able to tolerate a lot of instability and be very good at in situations where they emotionally disengage. So that varies. And for someone, of course, who has this fear for attachment adaptation, changes are really triggering, and that's very difficult. And what also separates these attachment styles is the level of activation. Someone who is secure, they activation levels, they have this wide tolerance for life events because they've grown up in a harmonious enough, in a good enough environment, and they can trust that they can turn to others for support. Whereas then someone who is more avoidant, it looks like perhaps on the outside that they are not activated, but actually closeness too soon can really destabilize them and they may shut down and withdraw. So this may be perhaps showing in terms of like ghosting and so on. Or someone who is very insecure and ambivalent, anxious, they are picking up all the signs for disconnection and are very sensitive to it. And the same, of course, for someone who's very fearful, who have this fearful attachment adaptation. Fourth factor that separates this attachment adaptation is the way different people react to distress. So while someone who's learned to shut their emotions, like the avoidant people have, it might appear that they become very cold and calculated. They may become very practical and cut off emotions. Someone who is very anxious, they become even more anxious. Difficult to then really soothe themselves. And the same, of course, happens for those who are fearfully, who have this fearful attachment. So I hope this has been useful for you. What I would like you to do now is to think about, where do I fit in all of that? Maybe do some journaling, and that will help you to figure out who you are, and then start also thinking about, okay, when I go out into the world, what type of woman might be a good fit? And then think about every time you meet someone in terms of dating, think about all of this. And I hope you found this useful. And now, if you'd like to become more confident in dating and talking to women and create more opportunities for really engaging with women and eventually find the right relationship for you, do go and download my Dating Confidence Kickstart Guide. And there you will get actionable steps, actionable advice on how to really start building your dating confidence and start what I call is like this step one in your dating when you are when you are preparing for this dating experiment. And that way you will create more opportunities for yourself and you have better chances of meeting the right person for you. So I hope you have a good rest of the day and see you soon. Bye.